Examination of motion. 1. What has been moved is not moving. What has not been moved is not moving. Apart from what has been moved and what has not been moved, movement cannot be conceived. 2. Where there is change, there is motion. Since there is change in the moving, and not in the moved or not moved, motion is in that which is moving. 3. How would it be acceptable for motion to be in the mover? When it is not moving, it is not acceptable to call it a mover. For whomever there is motion in the mover, there could be non-motion evident in the mover. But having motion follows from being a mover. 5. If motion is in the mover, there would have to be a twofold motion, one in virtue of which it is a mover, and one in virtue of which it moves. 6. If there were a twofold motion, the subject of that motion would be twofold. For without a subject of motion, there cannot be motion. 7. If without a mover, it would not be correct to say that there is motion, then if there were no motion, how could there be a mover? 8. Inasmuch as a real mover does not move, and a non-mover does not move. Apart from a mover and a non-mover, what third thing could move? 9. When without motion, it is unacceptable to call something a mover, how will it be acceptable to say that a mover moves? 10. For him from whose perspective a mover moves, there would be the consequence that without motion there could be a mover, because a mover moves. 11. If a mover were to move, there would be a twofold motion, one in virtue of which he is a mover, and one in virtue of which the mover moves. 12. Motion does not begin in what has moved, nor does it begin in what has not moved, nor does it begin in what is moving. In what, then, does motion begin? 13. Prior to the beginning of motion, there is no beginning of motion in the going or in the gone. How could there be motion in the not gone? 14. Since the beginning of motion cannot be conceived in any way, what gone thing, what going thing, and what non-going thing can be posited? 15. Just as a moving thing is not stationary, a non-moving thing is not stationary. Apart from the moving and the non-moving, what third thing is stationary? 16. If without motion, it is not appropriate to posit a mover, how could it be appropriate to say that a moving thing is stationary? 17. One does not halt from moving, nor from having moved or not having moved. Motion and coming to rest, and starting to move are similar. 18. That motion just as the mover itself is not correct. Nor is it correct that they are completely different. 19. It would follow from the identity of mover and motion that agent and action are identical. 20. It would follow from a real distinction between motion and mover that there could be a mover without motion and motion without a mover. 21. When neither in identity nor in difference can they be established. How can these two be established at all? 22. The motion by means of which a mover is manifest cannot be the motion by means of which he moves. He does not exist before that motion. So what and where is the thing that moves? 23. A mover does not carry out a different motion from that by means of which he is manifest as a mover. Moreover, in one mover, a twofold motion is unacceptable. 24. A really existent mover doesn't move in any of the three ways. A non-existent mover doesn't move in any of the three ways. 25. Neither an entity nor a non-entity moves in any of the three ways. So motion, mover and root are non-existent. Chapter 3. Examination of the senses. 1. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and mind are the six sense faculties. Their spheres are the visible objects, etc. 2. That very seeing does not see itself at all. How can something that cannot see itself see another? 3. The example of fire cannot elucidate seeing, along with the moved and not moved in motion that has been answered. For, when there is not even the slightest non-seeing seer, how could it make sense to say that seeing sees? 5. Seeing itself does not see. Non-seeing itself does not see. Through seeing itself, the clear analysis of the seer is understood. 6. Without detachment from vision there is no seer. Nor is there a seer detached from it. If there is no seer, how can there be seeing or the seen? 7. Just as the birth of a son is said to occur in dependence on the mother and father, so consciousness is said to arise in dependence on the eye and material form. 8. From the non-existence of seeing and the seen it follows that the other four faculties of knowledge do not exist. And all the aggregates, etc., are the same way. 9. Like the seen, the heard, the smelled, the tasted, and the touched, the hearer, sound, etc. And consciousness should be understood. Chapter